Her tiny hands were shaking as she tugged at the stranger's sleeve. Tears streaked down her face, her voice breaking with every word. "They're beating my mama. She's dying. Please." The throne room fell silent. Glasses clinked to a stop. Every conversation died mid-sentence. Every eye turned. But the man she had chosen to beg was no ordinary stranger. He was Theron Nightshade, the most feared Alpha King in the realm, a male whose very name made grown warriors tremble. And what he did next, no one in that hall would ever forget. It was a cold winter evening in the Royal City, 1987. The Silver Moon Hall buzzed with the usual crowd of high-ranking alphas, conducting pack business over expensive wine and hushed negotiations. This wasn't just any gathering. This was Alpha King Theron's domain. Every wolf knew to keep their heads down and their mouths shut. Every alpha understood the unspoken rules. You minded your own business, you paid your respects, and you never, ever caused a scene. Theron Nightshade sat at the head table, a mountain of a man whose very presence commanded absolute submission. At 350 years old, he had built an empire that stretched across 5 territories. His dark eyes missed nothing. His word was law. And tonight, like every winter solstice for the past century, he was conducting the quarterly alliance meeting with his territorial alphas. The conversation flowed in low, measured tones. Territories were discussed. Treaties were renewed. Problems were addressed with surgical precision. This was how Theron operated. Methodical, calculated, without emotion clouding judgment. He had survived 3 centuries in this position because he understood one fundamental truth. Sentiment was weakness, and weakness got you killed. His reputation was built on being utterly untouchable, unmated, unfeeling. The Alpha King who showed mercy to no one. But then something happened that would shatter the carefully constructed walls Theron had built around his heart over 300 years. The hall's heavy oak doors burst open with such force they slammed against stone walls. Every head turned. Conversations died instantly. Guards rushed forward, hands on weapons. But before they could intercept the intruder, everyone saw what had caused the commotion. A little girl, no more than 6 years old, stood trembling in the doorway. Her clothes were torn and filthy. Blood, not hers, stained her small dress. Her dark hair hung in tangled knots around a face streaked with tears and terror. She looked like she had run through hell itself to get here. But what made every wolf in that room freeze wasn't her appearance. It was her scent. Omega, a child, Omega, alone, terrified, and completely unprotected. The child's desperate eyes swept the room, searching for something, someone, anyone who might help her. The hall's occupants stared back in stunned silence. Some looked away, uncomfortable. Others whispered among themselves, annoyed that their meeting had been disrupted. But the little girl wasn't looking for sympathy. She was looking for power. Her gaze landed on Theron's table, and something in those innocent brown eyes recognized an Alpha King when she saw one. Maybe it was the way every other wolf in the room deferred to him. Maybe it was the absolute authority radiating from his massive frame. Or maybe it was something deeper. A child's instinct recognizing the one person who could actually do something. Without hesitation, she ran straight toward him. The room held its collective breath. Theron's personal guards tensed, hands moving instinctively toward their weapons. This was unprecedented. No one approached the Alpha King uninvited, especially not like this. But before anyone could react, the little girl reached Theron's table and grabbed his sleeve with both tiny hands. Her fingers clutched the expensive fabric as if it were a lifeline. And then she spoke those words that would echo in Theron's mind for the rest of his immortal life. "They're beating my mama. She's dying. Please, Alpha King. Please, help her." The silence that followed was deafening. Every eye was on Theron, waiting to see how the notorious Alpha King would handle this unprecedented situation. His reputation was built on being ice-cold, unfeeling, a male who had executed wolves for far less disruption than this. Theron looked down at the child clinging to his arm. Her face was turned up toward his, those brown eyes wide with desperation and hope that nearly broke something in his chest. And her scent, gods, her scent was so painfully familiar, it made his wolf howl in recognition. Omega, young, innocent. Exactly like, no. He couldn't think about that. Wouldn't let himself remember. You see, Theron Nightshade hadn't always been the cold, calculating Alpha King that the realm feared. Once upon a time, 300 years ago, he had been a different male. A male who understood what it meant to lose everything that mattered. Theron had been bonded to a woman named Lyanna. She was his true mate, the light of his world, the only person who could make him laugh, who could soften the brutal edges that leadership had sharpened. They had dreams of pups, of building something beautiful together despite the ugly world Theron ruled. But those dreams were shattered one night when a rival pack decided to send Theron a message. They didn't come for him directly. That would have been too easy, too expected. Instead, they went after the one thing they knew would destroy him more completely than any challenge or war ever could. They went after Lyanna. Theron came home that night to find his world torn apart. His mate, his future, his heart. All of it gone in an instant, her body broken and discarded like she meant nothing. The investigation went nowhere. The council asked questions they already knew they'd never get answers to, and Theron learned the hardest lesson of his life. In his world, love was a liability that could be exploited by anyone ruthless enough to target it. From that night forward, Theron Nightshade built walls around his heart that no one could penetrate. He became ruthless because ruthlessness was survival. He became feared because fear was respect. He became alone because alone meant no one else could be used against him. For 3 centuries, those walls had held firm. No amount of pleading, threatening, or bribing had ever made Theron show mercy when mercy wasn't profitable. He had ordered executions of males who begged for their lives. He had destroyed packs while their alphas wept. He had separated families, exiled rogues, and ruled with an iron fist that never, ever wavered. But now, looking down at this little Omega who reminded him so painfully of the daughter he and Lyanna had dreamed of having, those walls began to crack. The child's grip tightened on his sleeve. Her voice came out in broken sobs as she tried to explain, "My mama. They came to our house, said she owed money, but Mama doesn't have money. Papa died and we're alone, and they hit her. Over and over. She won't wake up." Through her tears, Theron began to piece together a story that made his alpha rage simmer just beneath his skin. The little girl's name was Arya. Her mother, Isadora, worked as a seamstress on the edge of the territory. Just the 2 of them, trying to survive in a border area where rogues and rival packs constantly fought for control. Isadora had been caught in the middle, an unmated Omega with a child, unable to pay protection money to the rogues who demanded it, unwilling to abandon her home. And tonight, that impossible situation had finally exploded into violence. "There was so much blood," Arya whispered, her small voice cracking. "I tried to wake her up, but she just laid there. And they laughed. They said no one cares about Omegas like us." Something dark and primal stirred in Theron's chest. His wolf, dormant for so long, suddenly surged to the surface with a possessive fury he hadn't felt in centuries. This child, this brave little Omega who had somehow found the courage to run through dangerous territory, burst into the most feared hall in the realm, and approach him, the Alpha King himself. She could have hidden, could have run to neighbors, could have done 100 different things. Instead, she had chosen him. A child's desperate instinct had led her straight to the one person who had the power to actually make a difference. "What's your name, little one?" Theron asked, his voice gentler than anyone in that hall had ever heard it. Arya," she managed between sobs. "Arya Stone." Theron nodded slowly, then looked up at his beta, Marcus Blackwood, who stood frozen in shock. "Get the healers," Theron said quietly. "Now." Marcus hesitated for just a moment. In all his decades serving Theron, he had never seen his Alpha King make a decision this impulsive, this emotional. "My king, maybe we should—" "I said, get the healers." The command in Theron's voice made every wolf in the room instinctively bare their necks in submission. As Marcus hurried toward the exit, Theron turned his attention back to Arya. With surprising gentleness for a male his size, he knelt down beside her so they were at eye level. His massive frame dwarfed the tiny girl, but somehow his presence seemed to comfort rather than intimidate her. "Arya, I need you to listen to me very carefully," Theron said, his voice steady and calm despite the rage building in his chest. "I'm going to help your mama, but first I need you to tell me exactly what these males looked like. Can you do that?" Arya nodded eagerly, relief flooding her features. Through her tears, she began to describe the attackers. 3 males, all rogues. One had a scar across his throat. Another had gray streaks in his hair. The third had been wearing a torn leather jacket with silver studs. They had called each other by names, Finn, Drake, and Scar. Theron's expression darkened as he listened. He recognized the descriptions immediately. Finn Graves and his crew, a group of rogues who had been operating on the border territories for months, extorting money from unmated Omegas and lone wolves who had no pack protection. They were known for their brutality, their willingness to hurt innocents. But what they had done tonight was different. What they had done tonight crossed a line that even rogues knew better than to cross. Theron stood up, his decision made with the kind of absolute certainty that had ruled empires. "Kale," he called to one of his most trusted warriors, "gather the hunting party. I want Finn Graves and his crew found. Alive. Bring them to the Blackstone compound. I want to have a conversation with them." Kale's smile was predatory. "Consider it done, Alpha King." "Marcus," Theron continued, addressing his beta, "send word to the royal healers. Tell them to prepare for emergency treatment. Tell them it's a direct order from me." Marcus nodded and immediately began issuing commands through the mind link. Theron looked around the hall one more time, taking in the shocked faces of his alphas and their seconds. He knew this moment would be talked about for decades. The night the Alpha King showed mercy. The night the ice-cold ruler let a little Omega child melt his frozen heart. But he didn't care about any of that anymore. All he cared about was the small hand that slipped into his, trusting him completely. "Is my mama going to be okay?" Arya asked in a tiny voice. Theron squeezed her hand gently, carefully controlling his strength so he wouldn't hurt her. "I'm going to make sure she is," he promised. "And I keep my promises." The Alpha King never made promises he couldn't keep. The ride through the territory took 12 minutes at full speed. Theron sat in his armored vehicle, with Arya beside him, her small body finally relaxing for the first time in hours. She had stopped crying, though her eyes remained wide and watchful. Every few seconds, she would look up at Theron, as if making sure he was still there, still committed to helping her. Behind them, 3 more vehicles followed, one carrying the royal healers and their equipment, the others filled with Theron's most deadly warriors. As they pulled up to the small cottage on the border territory, Theron could see the devastation immediately. The front door hung crooked on its hinges. Through the broken windows, he could see overturned furniture and scattered belongings. But Theron's attention was focused on what lay inside. Arya's grip tightened on Theron's hand as they stepped out of the vehicle. The cold night air carried the scent of blood, Omega blood, and something in Theron's chest twisted painfully. Through the doorway, they could see a figure lying motionless on the floor. Isadora Stone lay crumpled near the overturned table. Her dark hair fanned across the wooden floor, matted with blood. More blood pooled beneath her head, and her breathing came in shallow, irregular gasps. Theron had seen enough violence in his 3 centuries to know she was fading fast. The royal healers rushed past them, their practiced hands already working to assess her injuries. Severe head trauma, the lead healer muttered, checking her pulse. Broken ribs, possible internal bleeding. We need to move her to the palace, immediately. Theron watched as they worked, but his attention was divided. Arya stood frozen in the doorway, her small frame trembling as she took in the destruction of everything she knew. Her home, her safety, her mother's life. All of it lay in ruins around them. Arya, listen to me, Theron said, crouching down to meet her eyes. The healers are going to take care of your mama. But I need you to stay strong for her, okay? The little girl nodded, though fresh. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Will she remember me when she wakes up? The question hit Theron harder than any blow he'd ever taken in battle. He thought of Lyanna, of all the things left unsaid, all the moments stolen by violence. She'll remember, he said firmly, his voice rough with emotion he hadn't felt in centuries. And she'll be so proud of how brave you were tonight. As the healers loaded Isadora onto a stretcher, Theron's phone buzzed. Kyle's voice came through, crisp and efficient. Alpha King, we found them. Finn and his crew were at a rogue bar, bragging about their work tonight. They're secured at Blackstone. Theron's jaw tightened. The rage that had been simmering beneath his protective instincts began to surface like a beast waking from hibernation. These weren't just random rogues anymore. They were the males who had put a 6-year-old Omega through hell. They were the reason Isadora might never see another sunrise. Good, Theron replied, his voice deadly calm. I'll be there after I get Arya settled. The ride to the royal palace passed in a blur of sirens and Arya's whispered prayers. Theron found himself holding the little girl's hand as she spoke to her unconscious mother, telling her about the Alpha King who was going to help them, promising to be brave if she would just wake up. At the palace, the healers disappeared into the royal medical wings while Theron made arrangements. Arya would stay in a suite adjacent to her mother's, round-the-clock protection, the best care available, anything and everything she could possibly need. But as Theron tucked Arya into the massive bed, he knew his night was far from over. The little girl had fallen asleep, clutching a stuffed wolf one of the servants had brought her, exhaustion finally claiming her small body. She looked so peaceful, so innocent, so different from the broken, terrified child who had stumbled into his hall hours earlier. Theron stepped into the hallway and pulled out his phone. Marcus, bring the vehicle around. It's time to visit our guests. The Blackstone compound was one of Theron's more secure properties. Thick stone walls, no windows. The kind of privacy that allowed for the type of justice the council didn't need to know about. Finn Graves and his 2 crew members sat chained to the wall in the center of the chamber. Their earlier bravado had been replaced by the kind of fear that came with recognizing your situation had gone from bad to catastrophic. All 3 were rogues, maybe in their 30s, with the kind of arrogance that came from thinking violence against the weak made you strong. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Theron entered the compound slowly, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. His alpha presence filled every corner of the room, making the rogues instinctively try to submit even though they were chained. Behind him, Marcus and Kale took positions by the door, their expressions promising that no one was leaving this room without the Alpha King's permission. Gentlemen, Theron said, his voice conversational, but carrying an undertone that made even his own warriors tense. I understand you had a busy evening. Finn, the one with the throat scar, tried to maintain his defiance. Look, Alpha King, whatever this is about, we can work something out. We're just trying to survive out there in the border territories. You know how it is. Theron walked a slow circle around the 3 chained rogues, studying them like a predator sizing up prey. Survival, he repeated. Tell me, Finn, how does beating an unmated Omega unconscious in front of her 6-year-old daughter fall under survival? The color drained from Finn's face. Drake and Scar began to sweat visibly. They were starting to understand that this wasn't about territory or money, or any of the usual reasons wolves found themselves facing the Alpha King's judgment. The woman was holding out on us, Drake stammered. She owed protection money. We had to make an example. An example. Theron stopped walking. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. What kind of example did you think you were making when you traumatized a 6-year-old Omega child? Neither rogue answered. They couldn't, because there was no answer that would save them now. Theron reached into his jacket and pulled out something small, the stuffed wolf that Arya had been clutching when he found her in her destroyed home. This belonged to Arya Stone, Theron said, his voice deadly quiet. 6 years old. Loves butterflies and chocolate. Dreams of becoming a healer so she can help people. Tonight, she watched 3 grown males beat her mother unconscious over $50. He held up the toy where all 3 rogues could see it. $50, he repeated. That's what Isadora had saved for next week's food. Barely enough to keep them fed, and you 3 thought it was worth putting a child through hell to take it. Finn made one last desperate attempt at negotiation. Look, Alpha King, we didn't know the kid was there. If we had known, if you had known what? Theron's voice cut through the excuse like a blade. If you had known, you would have beaten her too? Made sure there were no witnesses to your heroic victory over a single unmated Omega trying to survive? Theron set the stuffed wolf on a nearby table, then walked to where various implements had been laid out. Not weapons exactly, but tools that could become very persuasive in the right hands. Here's what's going to happen, he said, his tone remaining conversational despite the deadly intent radiating from every word. You're going to tell me exactly how much money you've extorted from Omegas and lone wolves in the border territories. Every dollar, every cent. And then you're going to help me figure out how to return it to the people you've been bleeding dry. Drake's voice cracked. We don't keep records. The money's already spent. Then you'll work it off, Theron interrupted. Hard labor, rebuilding, whatever it takes to restore what you've stolen. Under guard, for however long it takes. You can't, Finn started to protest. Theron was suddenly right in front of him, moving faster than any of them had seen coming. His hand wrapped around Finn's throat, not squeezing, just holding, a reminder of how easily an Alpha King could end a life. I am the law in this realm, Theron said softly, dangerously. I can do whatever I want. The only question is whether you 3 walk out of here with a chance to redeem yourselves, or whether I let my wolf decide your fate. And trust me, he's very angry right now about what you did to that little Omega child. Finn's eyes widened as he felt the full force of Theron's alpha dominance pressing down on him like a physical weight. We'll do it, he gasped. Whatever you want. Just please. Theron released him and stepped back. You'll report to Marcus every day at dawn. You'll work until dusk. You'll rebuild every home you've damaged, repay every Omega you've extorted, and restore every shred of security you've destroyed in those territories. And if I hear even a whisper about any of you causing problems, if I hear you so much as looked at someone wrong, I will finish what we started here tonight. Are we clear? All 3 rogues nodded frantically. Get them out of my sight, Theron said to his warriors. Put them to work. As the rogues were dragged away, Theron's phone rang. It was the head healer calling from the palace. Alpha King! The healer's voice was cautiously optimistic. Lady Isadora is stable. The surgery went better than expected. She's a fighter. Theron felt a weight lift from his chest that he hadn't even realized was there. And Arya? Sleeping peacefully. She asked the nurses to tell you thank you for keeping your promise. After ending the call, Theron looked at Marcus and Kyle. I want those borders. Territories secured. No more rogues operating without pack law. No more unmated Omegas living in fear. Consider it done, Alpha King, Marcus replied. But Kale hesitated, looking at his king with something approaching wonder. My king, if you don't mind me asking, why? Why get involved like this? It's not like you to... To what? Theron asked quietly. To care? Kale had the grace to look embarrassed, but Theron just shook his head. For 300 years, I've ruled with ice in my veins because I thought it made me strong. I thought caring was weakness, but tonight, a 6-year-old Omega showed me more courage than I've seen in most alphas. She ran through dangerous territory, burst into a hall full of the most powerful wolves in the realm, and demanded help from the one person she thought could provide it. He picked up the stuffed wolf from the table, holding it carefully. If that little girl can be that brave, Theron continued, then maybe it's time I remembered what it means to be strong for the right reasons. 6 months later, Isadora Stone stood in the doorway of her new home. A beautiful cottage in the heart of the royal territory, built by the same 3 rogues who had nearly destroyed her life. She watched through sparkling new windows as her daughter Arya played in the garden that the Alpha King himself had designed. The border territories were now under permanent pack protection. No more rogues, no more extortion, no more Omegas living in fear. And every week, without fail, Alpha King Theron Nightshade visited. Not as the feared ruler of the realm, but as the male who had chosen to let a little girl's courage crack open his frozen heart. Isadora would prepare tea. Arya would show him her latest drawings and tell him about the healing classes she was attending at the Royal Academy. And for a few precious hours, the 3 of them would sit together like something approaching family, a family none of them had dared to dream possible. But there was something else growing in that cottage. Something neither Isadora nor Theron wanted to name yet, but both felt with increasing intensity. The way Theron's eyes lingered on Isadora when he thought no one was watching. The way her breath caught when his hand accidentally brushed hers passing a teacup. The way his wolf growled possessively whenever another male came near her. The way her Omega nature responded to his presence with a contentment she'd never known. They were both too cautious to rush it, both too scarred by past losses to risk vulnerability. But Arya, with the wisdom only children seemed to possess, knew exactly what was happening. Mama, she whispered one night before bed, the Alpha King looks at you the way Papa used to. Isadora's breath caught. Sweetheart, that's not... And you look at him the same way, Arya continued, her young face serious. Like he makes you happy. Like you're not scared anymore. And it was true. For the first time since her mate had died, Isadora felt safe, protected, cherished. And Theron, the Alpha King who had ruled for 3 centuries without feeling anything, found himself falling for the brave Omega who had survived hell, and the little girl who had reminded him what it meant to have something worth protecting. One evening, as Arya slept peacefully in her room, Theron and Isadora sat together in the garden under the stars. I never thanked you properly, Isadora said softly, for saving us, for giving us this life. Theron was quiet for a long moment. You don't owe me thanks. That night, Arya didn't just save your life. She saved mine too. Isadora looked at him, confusion clear in her expression. I'd been alone for so long, Theron continued, his voice rough with emotion he no longer tried to hide. I'd convinced myself it was strength, that not caring protected me. But your daughter showed me that real strength isn't about building walls. It's about being brave enough to care, even when it terrifies you. He turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his eyes stole her breath. Isadora, I know it's too soon. I know you need time, but I need you to know that I—" He stopped, searching for words he hadn't spoken in 3 centuries. "I care. About you. About Arya. About this family we've somehow become." Isadora felt tears prick her eyes. "I care too," she whispered. "More than I thought I could after everything." Theron reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When she didn't, his hand cupped her face with devastating gentleness. "Then we'll take this slow," he said. "As slow as you need. I've waited 300 years. I can wait as long as it takes for you to feel safe with me." "I already feel safe with you," Isadora admitted. "That's what scares me." Theron's smile was tender. "Then be scared with me. We'll figure this out together." The city whispered about the night the Alpha King saved a child and found his soul. But Arya knew the real truth that the adults had missed entirely. She hadn't saved her mother by finding the most dangerous wolf in the realm. She had saved all of them: her mother, herself, and the lonely Alpha King who had forgotten what it meant to love. Sometimes the smallest hands carry the greatest power to change everything, and sometimes the strongest wolves are the ones brave enough to let their hearts break open again.